Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and today we're taking a look at Magnus Carlsen's Game Week 8 Wildcard. Now if you don't know who Magnus Carlsen is, he is the world #1 chess player currently and has broken all sorts of records in the chess world. He has been world #1 for a record 119 times, including, this is pretty badass if you ask me, he's been the world #1 for a consecutive 107 times from July in 2011 right through until May 2020. Now that is one hell of a feat in a very difficult strategic game such as chess. This is his YouTube channel on screen if you would like to go and have a look at what's going on in the world of chess and Magnus Carlsen. And there is a little bit of a scandal going on in the chess world at the moment, but we'll keep all that aside and keep it to the FPL content. Magnus Carlsen is an elite FPL manager. He started playing the game in 2014-15, but this was obviously just the first time he set up an account, set it up late and just started playing probably very near to the end of the season to see what was what. But since then, he has never finished outside the top 176,000 in the world. In the very first season that he actually played the game, he came 86k, then followed up by the 175,000. But then he goes 2,300 in the world, 24k in the world, 10th, 7,600 in the world, and 4,300 in the world. Now those are just outstanding results across since 2015-2016. So as you can see, very astute manager. I think the strategic world of chess plays very well into what he's doing here in FPL, and so it's a good idea for us to go and have a look at some of these elite managers and see what they are thinking when it comes to big strategic plays that they play throughout the game. So Magnus pulled his wildcard in Game Week 8. I'll read it out for those of you that do not have the visuals. He scored a whopping 80 points, which was a Game Week rank of 122,000th. It took him from a little over 1 millionth in the world right the way up to 218k. So he's made an 800,000 rank increase with this Game Week 8 wildcard. And his team reads out Pope in net with 2 points. He had Luca Dean with 7 points, Cancelo with 9, Trippier with 5, De Bruyne in midfield with 10 points, Son with his hat-trick off the bench for 19 points, Martinelli with 3, Gordon with 2, Mitrovic with 2, Haaland captained with 6 points through to 12, and Isak with 9. On the bench he's got Everson, Nico Williams, Andreas and Totti, so a pretty light bench. He's got 2 starters in Nico Williams and Andreas and 2 dead bench members in Totti and Everson, both at 3.9 million when he bought them in. He has spent all the money on this wildcard, so he's left 0.0 in the bank, and he's set up a threemium. This was talked about quite heavily in pre-season and early on in the season for FPL because of the very kind pricing that FPL offered up for a lot of the players this year. And it looks like Magnus has said that pricing is too kind and we are going to absolutely lump on with premiums moving forward until, well, at least Game Week 16. Until I guess he gets to reassess at that point. Now, in Game Week 7, well, we'll go back to Game Week 6 because that was the last time that FPL actually played. You can see that he had a lot of money tied up in defense. He had a very heavy backline with Trent, Walker, Cancelo, Cucurella and James. He still had Haaland in his team, obviously, and had Salah as well. So he was playing a 5-3-2 with, again, a very light bench with Greenwood, Colback and Everson on the bench as Andreas as his only really strong playing bench member here. He is stuck with that plan with game week 8, also keeping a very light bench and getting as much money as he can onto the pitch. But he has absolutely swerved anything to do with Liverpool and Salah and Trent, which, if we have a look at what Liverpool have been doing over the recent weeks, looks like a pretty smart play from here. He's also not gone with James in defence for Chelsea, who is probably one of the first names on my team sheet and a lot of other managers' team sheets on a game week 8 or 9 wildcard. And of course, he has had to make some sacrifices across this team in order to fit in this threemium. So without James and Trent, who are 6 and 7.3 or 7.4 million respectively, he is able to fit in De Bruyne, Son and Haaland and keep a pretty strong playing team. Mitrovic up front is pretty much a lock in most people's team, and he has decided to go with Isak instead of Tony in his Game Week 8 wild card. Now, he has been caught a little bit off guard with his wild card before the international break, with Isak getting a lower leg injury, will be out for a couple of game weeks, and Luca Digne with a fractured ankle, I think it was, who's going to be out for at least 2 to 3 game weeks. It looks like he might be back a little bit sooner. So he does have some injuries to deal with in this team. However, what we'll do is we'll chuck his team ID into the transfer planner to see if we can figure out what he was thinking with this wildcard without having to deal with these injuries, assuming that he could just roll the transfer and move forward to see what he might have been thinking. So in game week 9, his team would probably line up like this. Now, it's obviously a lot of this is guesswork in terms of who he would be choosing to play off the bench and whatnot, but let's just assume that the same starting team was lining up. So he would have Pope in net away to Fulham, Luca Digne away to Leeds, Cancelo at home to Man United, and Trippier away to Fulham. He then has De Bruyne playing Man United at home, Son versus Arsenal away. Now, this Arsenal and Tottenham fixture typically has a lot of goals in it. He's also got Martinelli here, so got 2 players from the same fixture. And so both these players could come away with points in this game. Obviously, Man City could quite easily score against Manchester United, could score a few goals against Manchester United, and so there's no problems there. He's also gone with Gordon. So Gordon is currently 5.6 at the moment, pretty much nailed on for Everton, playing up front, and has been doing all right so far in this season. Then has Mitrovic at home to Newcastle, so he has got Mitrovic playing both Trippier and Pope in his team this week. He's got Haaland up front against Man United at home, and Isak would have been away to Fulham. And we assume that it would probably be benching Nico Williams away to Leicester, Andreas at home to Newcastle, and Totti just does not play. He'd probably put Andreas as bench number 1 here at a guess, but that's by the by. And assuming that he was going to roll a transfer this week through into game week 10, it would be lining up like this. We got Pope against Brentford, Luca Digne against Nottingham Forest. That's a great fixture. Cancelo at home to Southampton. Again, Trippier at home to Brentford. De Bruyne plays Southampton at home. Son has got a game away to Brighton. Martinelli then has a tricky game against Liverpool. Now, this is this last tricky game in game week. This is not the last game. This is game week 10. Arsenal blank in game week 12, and so at this point, he may be thinking that he is going to start downgrading. He's basically has to get rid of one of these 4 players in order to field a full 11 in game week 12. And at this point, he would have 2 free transfers in his team. And so he may have been looking at the likes of potentially Martinelli out this week. I doubt that he would have lined up for a De Bruyne out at this point, considering that they do play at home to Southampton, and also Tottenham have a great game away to Brighton here, and so Son is probably most likely sitting in his team. I think he's brought Son in for a captaincy option in game week 11 when Haaland goes and plays Liverpool. This looks like potentially how he was looking to swerve that difficult fixture for Man City and Liverpool. Mitrovic is away to West Ham, Haaland again at home to Southampton, and then Isak had a great game at home to Brentford. And so all in all, it's a pretty strong team, with the only difficult fixture in there being Martinelli, which could have been, well, if he was going to sell him, would have had to have been a downgrade, considering he left 0.0 in the bank. Or potentially he was just looking at playing maybe Andreas in this spot, away to West Ham. West Ham away is not an easy fixture to deal with, but when you do go threemium, you do have to play with some of your budget enablers in order to be able to field a strong team around, a strongish team around these three very expensive assets. Now, if we move into game week 11, we'll go through this. Now, this is the tricky week that everyone is looking at Man City playing Liverpool in game week 11, and then Man City having a blank in the following game week. And as you can see here, he would have 3 City lads lining up to go away to Liverpool in this match. He probably would have, he obviously would have spent a transfer in game week 10, because there's no way he would have burnt a transfer at this point. And so he could have 2 free transfers here, and maybe looking at the likes of De Bruyne out, and potentially even Martinelli. Yeah, so in game week 10, when we were looking at potentially benching Martinelli against Liverpool, if you do hold on to him in that week, he's got a great fixture against Leeds away before Arsenal's blank in game week 12. And so my guess here is that he was probably going to downgrade a De Bruyne. Now, I would love to say I knew exactly what he was doing here, but I've obviously got no clue, and we are just guessing. But for me, I would probably be looking at a De Bruyne down to someone like a Sterling, potentially. Because Chelsea's fixtures in game weeks 10 and forward read amazing. In game week 11, they have Aston Villa away, they then have Brentford away, Man United at home. Okay, that's not too great, but then they go Brighton away, Arsenal at home, and Newcastle away up until game week 16, when we get the unlimited transfers. Now, going down to Sterling from De Bruyne would give him approximately, roughly 2 million in the bank, depending on when he bought. The price changes have been quite hectic, so depending on where he got De Bruyne at, he probably have about 2 million in the bank, which would allow him to upgrade someone like Luca Digne, who has Chelsea at home, which is not a great fixture for Luca Digne, and potentially start to move his pieces around, or his players around, in that fashion. Because if he doesn't do any of that, in game week 12, he would be lining up something like this, where Cancelo, De Bruyne, Haaland, and Martinelli all do not have games this week. Son has a tricky fixture away to Man United. Son can score in pretty much any fixture. He's just an elite finisher. If he gets any sorts of shots falling at his feet, he can sink them, and so it's not a definite swerve. Son may be sitting in for this fixture, but this is something that he would be having to deal with leading up into game week 12. Now, past game week 12, game weeks 13, 14, 15, and 16, there is a great run of fixtures, but over the immediate set of fixtures after a wildcard typically sets you up for the next 4 to 6 type fixtures. But because he's gone so heavy, well, not so heavy, but he's got 4 players that definitely do not have a game in game week 12, you have to assume that he had some plans for how to deal with that moving forward. Now, if you are watching this, Magnus, I would love to know whether or not you knew about the Son potential benching for this week. if you were quite happy to bring in Son, assuming that he would come off the bench against tired legs at a very defensively weak Leicester, and that was the gamble that you were happy to go with, well played indeed. I mean, Son coming off the bench for a hat-trick for the final 30 minutes of the match is outstanding. What I would like to know now, though, is how is he going to deal with both Isak and Luca Digne having proper injuries that are going to set them out of the team for 2 to 3 weeks. Now, this is why I decided to take a hit in Game Week 8 to delay my wildcard into Game Week 9, because I was a little bit worried about whether or not injuries were going to pop up through and across the international break. And this is why. So Magnus has been caught off guard here with a lower leg injury to Luca Digne and a lower leg injury to Isak and a fractured leg to Luca Digne. He will have to probably deal with this because he has left his bench incredibly weak. And if we just go back and reset this to what we're looking at this week, which is Game Week 9. So Luca Digne is out. So if we chuck him on the bench for his only playing defender and Nico Williams. Nico Williams away to Leicester is actually not a terrible fixture. I do suspect that Leicester will score goals against Nottingham Forest. In fact, I would suspect that anyone is going to score goals against Nottingham Forest. But Nico Williams does come with some attacking threat. I myself have gone for both Trippier and Pope because, not just because, people are a little bit worried about doubling up on Newcastle because they do not look like they're going to keep many clean sheets, but I'm quite happy to do so because Trippier has multiple routes to points through his direct free kicks and deliveries in game, and Nico Williams comes with the same set of routes to points, albeit playing for a much weaker team than Newcastle, but he is probably quite playable in this fixture. Isak is also out for a few weeks. And would have to go to the bench and play someone like Andreas. Andreas at home to Newcastle is, again, probably not the worst thing in the world for him to be playing this week. However, with Andreas, Nico Williams, and Gordon all being not prolific scorers in the game. I mean, Gordon's probably your best shot at scoring points this week, but also with Martinelli having a difficult game to Tottenham, as well as Son playing Arsenal away, and all three City lads lining up against Manchester United, could be quite a tricky week for Magnus here. And so I would suspect that he is going to deal with the likes of probably Isak first, because he is probably the most owned player that could drop in value quickly due to this injury, as a lot of people were bringing in Isak for Newcastle's run of fixtures. My guess is that he will probably go something like benching Andreas and getting rid of Isak for... The obvious move would be Tony. However, I think he is priced out of that at the moment. So leaving 0.0 million in the bank means he cannot easily go from an Isak at 7.1 up to a Tony who is now at 7.3 in the game, having just had a price rise overnight. And so his only option here is to, if he does want to deal with Isak this week, is to probably downgrade. Now, he could downgrade here to someone like Solanke, which there's a lot of chatter out there about Solanke. Solanke is on penalties, and they do have an absolute great run of fixtures. They have also got rid of Scott Parker, who is a highly defensive manager, and so the new manager in charge may open up a lot more attacking options, and so Solanke could be a shout moving forward in order to free up some funds for Magnus in this team, and to potentially take a hit to also deal with the Luca Digne situation. Luca Dean did have two very good fixtures here. Leeds, Nottingham Forest before they went and played Chelsea at home, and then had Fulham and Brentford afterwards. So Luca Dean was a pretty shrewd shout. He is super unlucky that he's got injured. Luca Dean is a troll though. Sorry all you Aston Villa supporters out there, but I've had him in my team on many occasions and he just always seems to give me painful decisions to make, which is clearly what is happening here. It's tricky. I suspect that his plans moving forward are probably a little bit blown to shreds here, and I do not know exactly what he is going to do, because he was probably relying on these 3 free transfers that he's got before game week 12 to deal with the 4 players that will not be playing in game week 12, but he now has 2 players that are out for the next 3 to 4 or 2 to 4 game weeks, which is the game weeks in which he was probably relying on both those players to play. And so I will be watching with very keen eyes to see what kind of transfers he makes this week. Also, I'm suspecting that he is just assuming that he is going to perma-captain Haaland, and the threemium. There is a lot of rhetoric out there that threemium is not that great if you're always going to be captaining Haaland. However, there is a different school of thought that I've come up with, in that if you have 2 other premiums, it's almost like you've got 2 captains playing in a week, because yes, you always want to captain a premium player, but if you are captaining Haaland every week as your premium, having 2 other premiums is almost like doubling up on premiums, as if someone else had chosen to captain a premium that was not Haaland. And with the likes of Gordon down at such a cheap price, and Martinelli at ludicrous value, he probably, I'm assuming Magnus had Martinelli from game week 1. Did he? Just check that quickly. Yeah, he did. So he's had Martinelli since the start. So Martinelli's up to 6.6 million. So he's got a lot of value tied up in Martinelli as well. And potentially that's why he kept him on the wild card as a very cheap enabler, playing for a great team with minutes assured, alongside Gordon, who is playing up front and has been. Has he got 2 goals, 0 assists, 90-minute man, or mostly a 90-minute man, apart from the Liverpool and West Ham fixtures in the last couple of games. You do need to make sacrifices across your team in order to fit in the threemium, and so the dead bench and the likes of Gordon while holding on to a Martinelli looks like a pretty strong way to be able to field such a strong 3-player premium in his team. Now, that's as much as I could come up with looking at his squad. I would love to know what he's going to do here, because the double injury is just super unlucky. Like that, there was probably some very well laid plans here moving forward in terms of shifting value around in order to maximize output across the coming game weeks before ditching players up until game week 12, and then setting yourself up for that beautiful run of fixtures from game week 13 through to 16 before we get the unlimited transfers. It will be interesting to see whether or not he takes a hit or decides that he will risk it with playing someone like Nico Williams and Andreas Pereira for this game week in order to potentially even hold on to maybe Luca Dean or Isak if the injuries are not too severe. There are talks that Isak will be out definitely for a couple of weeks, but Luca Dean looks like, even though he's got a fractured ankle, that he's going to be back in about 3 weeks, which is outstanding. It must be a very, very small fracture in order to do that, because most fractures keep you out for at least 4 weeks in football, considering you don't want to be running around on broken legs. But yeah, that is the review of Magnus Carlsen's Game Week 8 Wildcard. If you did like the video, please do consider giving it a like, and if you would like to be notified about more FPL content coming your way, please do click the big red subscribe button and hit that notification icon to be notified about all videos that are being deployed. And until next time, I will catch you again sometime soon. Cheers.